What's going on, everybody? It's Moonshine, the Hillbilly Hellraiser, back with another video. Just got finished doing my leg day, so I had a little time to kill after having a little protein shake with a little avocado in it, which tasted a lot better than I thought it was going to. Not really a big avocado guy, but I'm trying some different dietary tweaks and stuff like that. So I'm just sitting here getting ready to hit the shower in a bit. It's still Friday, so tonight I'm going to head out to the Brass Mug. There's a show there tonight. Cardiac Arrest and a bunch of other bands are playing, so I'm going to go check that out, and that should be a blast. But for now, the video that I planned on doing was I was going to talk some more wrestling stuff. I know a lot of the people who follow my channel for the metal stuff don't really give a crap about wrestling. So if you're not interested, that's fine. But I enjoy talking about it. I always give this preamble. It was a huge part of my life, from being a fan as a kid to a teenager into a young adult, then eventually getting into the business and all the various adventures and matches and people that I encountered along the way. So I love talking about it. I still follow it enough, not as much as I used to, mostly because I cut the cord, don't have cable anymore, so I don't watch it religiously. I don't record or anything. I just watch clips at this point. And really, for the most part, I don't really follow too many of the people on the current roster on WWE. I don't really watch AEW that much anymore. To me, it kind of seems like it's become a it became a potential alternative and second big large company to compete with WWE, or at least be an alternative to them. To it's basically become an overpriced indie federation, bunch of people that are overpaid, way too bloated of a roster. They've sped run the entire run of WCW in the matter of a couple of years, and have exhausted, in my opinion, pretty much any credibility that they have as a viable second option in the business. It's terrible. You can tell that by the dwindling audiences and stuff like that. But that being said, it was WrestleMania weekend this past weekend. It's like I mentioned previously, is a 2 day event. Not really a fan, but I did miss a couple of things that I wanted to talk about as far as WrestleMania itself, WrestleMania weekend, and the fallout from it. Friday, they always have the access stuff that they do on Fridays. I believe either Friday during the day or Saturday morning. I'm not quite sure which one it is, but they do a Hall of Fame ceremony where basically WWE honors a bunch of inductees into their Hall of Fame, which allegedly at some point in the before the end of time, they're going to have a physical location for all these inductees and all the memorabilia and stuff like that. It's allegedly going to be in Orlando. I'm not quite sure. I keep hearing that, and then year after year goes by, and you don't actually see a physical location. But nonetheless, so a couple of the big names that were inducted this year, or at least the ones that really kind of stood out to me. First of all, they created a whole new category to for moments, and the moment that they started with was the WrestleMania match from WrestleMania 13 between Bret Hart and Steve Austin. And that was a phenomenal match. I can remember as a kid watching that with my dad, and it was so cool because the way that the match was set up, the way that it was, the pacing and the psychology, the point where Steve Austin got color, and you had that iconic image of him stuck in Bret Hart's sharpshooter, and he's just gushing blood from his head and screaming in pain and that sort of thing. It was just such an indelible image, and again, so iconic, such a memorable moment in not just in WrestleMania history, but the pro wrestling business in general. It really, and it turned Austin. He was just a dastardly villain character at the time, tormenting Bret Hart. And eventually the crowd started turning on Bret, and it got to the point where it was a 50-50 booking with him, where in Canada he was considered a national treasure, and in America he would be here trashing the States with his brother and British Bulldog and Jim Neidhart and the whole Hart Foundation. Brian Pillman was a part of it when he was still alive. Man, a lot of every one of those guys, but Bret is dead. It's just tragic. And but that was one of the first things they did. The main event, as it were, was Triple H, Hunter Hearst Helmsley. He got inducted for a second or third time as an individual. And honestly, I didn't watch the speech. In my opinion, I like Triple H. I think he's been a very important figure in the wrestling business, not just as a talent, but as a behind the scenes guy. He's done a lot. I know a lot of people. He's another divisive figure because you have some people who think that he's ruining the business. You have other people who think that he's bringing it to this new golden age of pro wrestling. Uh, I know they're certainly more profitable, but I'm not so sure about the golden age of pro wrestling thing. But it was honestly the whole show was it was part of my language, but just self-aggrandizing bullshit. I mean, there was just the whole thing was I've never they've I don't recall having seeing Hall of Fames where throughout the entire thing they kept putting over the main guy behind it, and it was just one of those things where it should act surprised, like, oh, I didn't know they were doing any of this for me. It's like, come on now, really, who are you trying to work here? And then his speech, his the Hall of Fame ceremony itself was about 3 hours long, and he took up about an hour and 10 of it giving a speech. And I can't imagine, just having to sit there listen to your boss yank his own crank for that long had to be a little bit like, oh, can you believe this? We really have to sit through all this. So I don't know. I didn't watch any of that. I don't plan on watching any of it. I'm not going to sit there and listen to some guy, blow his own, what. But so that was that. But then the thing that was of special interest to me was Fred Ottman and John Tenta got inducted as well. If you're not familiar, uh, Fred Ottman was Tugboat and then later Typhoon, and John Tenta was Earthquake, and together they were the Natural Disasters in WWF. They at one point were the WWF Tag Team Champions. Phenomenal workers, great guys. Tenta, I had the pleasure and the privilege of not only working for his promotion in Sanford, Florida, back in the early 2000s. I also got the opportunity to wrestle him and in a tag match, in a four-way tag match. And even though I know it's all predetermined and John being the promoter allowed this to happen because he could have killed me at any moment, I also got to pin him in the match. So that was pretty cool. That's one of those accolades that nobody can ever take away from me. So it's very cool. Me and my partner got the win on him and a couple other notable figures in the business at the time, and it was really cool. John passed away years ago from cancer. He was battling cancer, and it just it is you know cancer's a futhermucker, but it was really cool. He had his kids. They had his kids and his family were there, and they were talking about him and paying him proper tribute and memorializing him. And then Fred, he got to say his piece and talk about what it meant to him to work with John and to get the opportunity to team with him and to have the run that they did. It was really cool. It was a little bit on the short side, but the the Booker man had to get in he had to get his stuff in. So, it is what it is. But it was very cool. I was really excited to hear that they were inducting those guys because Fred's a super nice guy too. He's local. He's a Tampa guy. He's a Malenko guy. So, we had that connection. Plus, he's very close with some of my contemporaries and some of my best friends in the business. Actually, he's when I used to stay with my tag partner had a townhouse, and Fred was over one day, and but I didn't know it because I work nights, so I was asleep during the day, and then I'd get up and kind of come downstairs, and my buddy Mike was like, "Hey, bro, you just missed Fred." I was like, "Who?" And he's like, "Oh, Typhoon, he was here." I was like, "No shit." But yeah, really cool guy, and it was really cool to see. But the other WrestleMania moment that I forgot to mention that would kind of tie into the metal community was on night two. Uh, they had a street fight match between two guys, Drew McIntyre and Damian Priest, two of the bigger guys in the company, and physically and both status wise in the company. And when Damian Priest was coming out, uh, they slowly panned out, and you see a hand. Then you start seeing the exterior of a guitar, the outline of a guitar, and then you see this tattoo on the hand. And I was like, wait a minute, I know that tattoo. And then they slowly start panning out, and it turned out to be Kerry King from Slayer. And he did the entrance music. He played live the entrance music for Damian Priest, and he got to walk out to the ring to Kerry King playing his music, which had to be really cool for him. I know he's a bit of a metalhead and a rocker, so I'm sure that that was just a great thrill to have, an accolade that people cannot take away from you. It's like, and especially if you're a metalhead, like if I were in the business, I would try to get something like that done. I might choose somebody different, but that would be really cool. Like I've always thought in my mind's eye of all the different things, if I ever had my WrestleMania moment and got to walk down the aisle, the sort of cool stuff that I would come up with. And if getting a musician that I was a fan of to play my music would be an option, I'd be like, oh hell yeah, I'd want to do something like that. But there was a little bit of controversy with it because I was watching a live stream of people. They were doing a watch along, and these guys are a little bit more devout, a little bit more on the Christian side of things, and they were all up in arms and throwing a hissy fit because Kerry King had a Baphomet shirt on, and as you know, 420 this year, April the 20th was Easter Sunday, so they were all aghast and their panties were all in a wad that how dare WWE and people need to say something about this. This is blasphemy, this is bullshit, this is just satanic horseshit. And these guys have done videos before. I'm not really going to promote their channel, but it's something I watch, and they've done long form videos before talking about all the satanism in wrestling and all the satanic and occultist imagery in wrestling and how awful it is for the business and society and stuff like that. And that's their opinion. They're entitled to it, and that's fine. I'm not going to knock them. But I just feel like sometimes it kind of becomes like almost to a degree, it just becomes almost like schizo posting. And you just basically you're going on this stream of consciousness that I think sometimes you're looking too deeply into it. I think a lot of the people in the wrestling business, I don't know what their religious affiliations are. I don't know what their beliefs are or what level of faith they have, if any. But I think a lot of times, a lot of them are just huge rock and heavy metal fans of varying degrees. There's a lot of metalheads in the WWE and in pro wrestling in general. So I think it's more about the image and less about like a hardcore devotion to any sort of religious beliefs or ideology or anything like that. So to me, it was much ado about nothing. And then there's the whole aspect of it where you get into the whole, these guys are kind of on the right side of things, or at least right adjacent as far as like societal views and political and stuff like that, which I've said a few times that's kind of more along what I fall on the lines of, but to me, when you're going out of your way to like try to like half-ass do the whole cancel culture thing, that's like, come on, give me a break. That's not something, last I checked, that's not something that if that's your team, that's not something that your team does. That's not supposed to be something that you're a part of, all the boycotting and stuff like that. But unfortunately, I think that is something that is becoming more prevalent. Like I think you're starting to see not a huge upswing of it, but there's definitely a little bit of that whole religious right thing coming back, and it's kind of like the whole PMRC thing. Even though, ironically, a lot of that were a bunch of people that were more on the left wing of the bird. So it's just, I don't know. I just think that it's like, come on, dude, really, you guys are you're really trying to go after this company because of that. But I think by and large, I don't think that's going to go anywhere. I don't think I haven't heard much of a big huge controversy or big just everybody all up in arms about it. Give me 1 second. With drinking all the protein drinks and the water and then the C4 and all that, eventually some of that has to go somewhere. You're not buying it, you're renting it. So had to step out for a quick second. But yeah, that was that. And I thought it was kind of interesting. Hopefully people's eyes haven't glazed over and have either skipped or stopped watching at this point. Because I find this stuff interesting and the way that it kind of ties into different things and different topics and whatnot. So I hope people found that kind of interesting. And then the night after, that's always a big night for wrestling because you get lots of returns and different surprises and stuff like that. And one of the surprises that wasn't quite a surprise, because nowadays the digital age stuff leaks all the time. It's even worse than when the dirt sheets were around. But they had Rusev, Miroslav. He returned. Rusev was in. He was in AEW. He was originally one of the original NXT Black and Gold guys. He was in FCW. Big, huge Bulgarian dude, very strong, very agile for a big man. He's got a kickboxing background. He does some. He's got some legit MMA experience. I don't think he's actually competed, but he trains in those styles, different martial arts. So he's a very believable, very realistic looking guy. Um, I've heard rumors that he's got a bit of an attitude. Like when he was in AEW, he didn't want to do the honors for anybody, so they pretty much just shelved him for the remainder of his contract. And now he's back in WWE. He had a good debut, and a lot of people were excited for it. I think I heard some people comment on it, like Stevie Richards and a couple other guys, a couple other notable figures in the business, and they made a good point that probably it would have been booking him the way they didn't make a whole lot of sense because they had him come out as a monster heel, beat up a popular comedy babyface team, but the crowd was cheering for him because the crowd wanted to see him. So I don't know if the answer would have been to bring him out as a face. He did a thing before he left called Rusev Day with one of the other talent that were there, who's the guy's name is Aiden English, and he's a ring announcer for TNA under his real name. Uh, I personally, what I would have done, what I was thinking they were going to do was they had a whole thing where Randy Orton didn't have an opponent because unfortunately Kevin Owens had a legit neck injury that he has to get operated on. So, me knowing how that stuff goes, good luck and rest easy and recover well to Kevin Steen. I've gotten the chance to be in the ring with him as well. Not make this about me or put myself over, but I had a lot of the little brief moment in time that he and I interacted. I enjoyed it. So I just, and I hate to hear that about anybody, but especially somebody who I've met along the way. It kind of like, it kind of bums me out, but and it's a rough, I can tell you from experience, it's a rough thing to come back from, and especially when you put in the time that he has, 25 years, you never know how much, how well, how long, and how much better it's gonna it's going to increase the quality of your life in the ring. I don't know how many, you get a bump card, and when you get neck surgery and it's at a certain point in your career, you might be to the point where maybe you have only a few short little clicks on the card left. So, but we'll see. I know WWE has phenomenal medical care. They work with some of the top physicians on the planet. I think that he goes to the Andrews Institute. A lot of them do in Birmingham, Alabama. It was actually where I wanted to get my surgery done, but it just didn't work out that way. Uh, so he should be fine. But anyhow, Randy Orton didn't have an opponent, and I thought that it would have made a lot of sense to have the lights go down and you have Aiden English come out and he start doing the opera thing where he's announcing Rusev. It would have got a huge pop, and I guess maybe they didn't want to ruin Randy Orton because they now have him plugged into the main event scene. So instead, what they did is they had him work with a guy named Joe Hendry, who's kind of an internet sensation. He works with TNA, and he's the TNA champion, and he does this whole thing where he's like a folk singer or something like that. I don't know. To me, he just looks like a gigantic dork. And I don't get he just has this cheesy smile and he does the spin thing and he's the stupid cheesy smile. And I don't get it. I just don't get it. I used to see him in Ring of Honor and I didn't quite get the whole appeal, but people seem to like him. And nowadays, the way the business is, it's all about viral moments. So he got to walk the aisle at WrestleMania, which, good on him, but I didn't really get it. But that's where I would have gone. But seeing as if this was the plan all along, that you got Randy Orton plugged in the main event scene, you don't really want to waste him on bringing him back you don't want to waste a Rusev return, bringing him back, and then having to decide, well, do you job out Randy Orton to him, or do you don't have him eat a pin right away because you're going to kill him. You're going to kill any heat that he's going to have. So I can see why they did it that way, but at the same time, putting him in there with a face when they know that they're going to get that the crowd's going to cheer for him, it doesn't. It seems counterproductive to the concept of getting him over as a monster heel. So, but I don't know. It's just the nature of the business now. People are going to cheer who they want to cheer. They're going to boo who they want to boo. You never know what the fans are going to do. They're so fickle and temperamental and mercurial at times. It's hard to sometimes it's difficult to book these people, unless like somebody suggested you go full on socio-political and stick him with Gunther, who's German, and Rusev, who's Bulgarian. You pretty much make him a Russian affiliate and try to get heat on him that way, going the old 80s route of the foreign heel. I don't know, that might be the best thing to do. But that's pretty much the WrestleMania talk. And then I kind of wanted to, I was going to talk a little bit about my career and one of my favorite promotions. I'll try to keep it quick because I can see I'm rolling up on 23 minutes here. So I don't want to take up any more of your time. I'm sure a lot of people have tuned out or haven't even watched at this point. But one of my favorite promotions that I ever worked for was a company called EWE. It stood for Elite Wrestling Entertainment. It was run by my buddies Steve Madison and Buck Quartermain. Uh, these were guys that were some of the biggest advocates of my work and anything that I did. They were the ones who came up with the idea for me to become Moonshine McCoy and do the hillbilly gimmick. Originally, I wasn't supposed to be a hillbilly. I wasn't supposed to be part of the gimmick, but they asked me to do it. My tag partner Mike Patrick asked me to do it with him. At first, they declined to let me get join the group, but then I think they decided that it might make more sense to have somebody that was a little bit more of a seasoned professional, even though I was botching jackass half the time and forget finishes and stuff like that. They wanted me in the group because it might be easier to keep to hide our other partner, Tom Cruise, Whiskey Willie, Jeremiah. At one point, his name was to hide his weaknesses. So EWE was a company that they ran for probably, I want to say, from roughly 2004 to roughly 2008. And it was just a lot of fun. I mean, we had a great little run there as far as an indie promotion. It was one of those companies where it was a who's who of indie talent would come through there. And we would even do these little spot shows where we would have student showcase events. And I promise you, we would have these shows that drew ridiculous houses, and not like they were packed to the rafters, brother. They're hanging off the rafters and hot the whole night, white hot, great heat, all that sort of thing. But we had a very respectable attendances. We'd have anywhere from 300 to 600 people at our shows, and this was a regular occurrence. It wasn't, and we would use guys that nobody had ever heard of, guys who weren't even officially in the business, but they were guys who were good marketers, and you could get them, like if they were working with Madison, he would get them through a match, and they would bring tons of people with them. And sometimes they bring lots of hot women with them, which is always a plus. And yeah, it was really cool. And it always would make me laugh because I would always be on these shows that people didn't know existed. They didn't know that the company was around, or that they nobody ever knew about us doing our thing, but we would always outdraw some of the bigger companies, some of the more higher profile indie standout companies in the entire Florida and Southeast region. But we never got our due a lot of times. And it was just, I always used to crack up at that. You'd have some of these promotions, they draw like 100 people, but they have freaking guys like Low Key and Homicide and CM Punk and TJ Perkins and some of these other indie guys from that time on their shows, and everybody wet their pants about it. And we'd have a guy named Mike Esom who nobody knew of, and Bobby Boutol, who we used to his name was like a play on butthole, so the crowd could chant Bobby Butthole. And we would draw these ridiculous crowds, and nobody ever knew about it. It was always wild. And then eventually EWE, we had a show in Ybor City, Florida, which is like a kind of like a party district of Tampa. And we had just a phenomenal lineup. The show was headlined by Dusty Rhodes and Ron Bass, Outlaw Ron Bass. Kevin Sullivan teamed up with Madison, and he worked with Mike Graham and another guy by the name of Lex Lovett, who was a phenomenal talent here in Florida, local guy, and did some stuff in Japan. The Sandman was on the show. D'Lo Brown, Billy Gunn, um, bunch of notable guys. Some other like names from the Indies from TNA at the time, and it was cool because I got to work the opening match on the show with my buddy, the late great Francisco Chiazzo, and we had a pretty decent opener. And I almost didn't get to work on the show. It was one of those deals where I took the night off of work. I had every intention and plan to work the show, and there was again a couple of these guys who they weren't good in the ring. They weren't talented. They would have actually brought down the quality of the show, but they had promised Buck and Steve that they could bring a bunch of people. They would sell a bunch of tickets and get a bunch of people to the show. So I almost lost my spot on the show because these guys allegedly were going to get so many people to the show, and then as it turned out, they were bullshitting. So Buck and Steve were like, "Well, who are we going to put in the opener?" Dan. You just put Dan in there. Dan and Frankie can open up the show. That's who should be on this. So I was fortunate. I got lucky. Uh, it was kind of funny at the time because I knew that this was going on, and I was kind of like a little upset about it. That it was almost like it was being treated like a favor to me, which it was. But at the same time, I kind of looked at it like that little piece of my ego that said, no, I deserve to be on this. I've worked pretty hard for you guys. Our group has worked pretty hard for you guys. We've gotten ourselves over. We've gotten the gimmick over. This is the biggest event in the history of this company. I think that we deserve to be on this show, and hindsight being 2020, I would say, especially if you're an aspiring wrestler hearing this or seeing this, I would say fight for yourself. You know, don't be afraid to speak up for yourself. The worst anyone's going to tell you is no. You know, you could always lose your gig at the with the promotion and lose favor with the promoter, or they could keep you around and job you out and devalue you. These sorts of things happen all the time, but at the same time, you know, stand up for yourself. You know, the whole know your worth phrase and that sort of thing. So, anyhow, I hope I haven't taken up too much of your time. We're running on a half hour here of me babbling. So, I'm going to hit the showers, get ready to go see cardiac arrest tonight. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you enjoyed the wrestling talk, a little brief, like friggin' microscopic view into the mind of an old, broken down, never was, never gonna be pro wrestler from the Indies of Florida. And yeah, and it was so if you like this, you know, let me know, you know, shoot me a comment or whatever the case might be. And you know, if you have any questions, you know, about wrestling, you know, let me know. You know, I'm willing to talk about pretty much anything as far as that goes. And yeah, so I will catch you on the next one. As always, everybody, this is Moonshine, the Hillbilly Hellraiser. Stay sick, stay heavy, stay brutal. Always suck a chin upon impact. And don't forget to breathe. Everybody have a good one, and I will catch you on the next video. Later.